isn't it?
Yeah. Let me just. Okay, so I think we are live. So hopefully it's all working for us. Fingers crossed. I have no idea. Practicing around with StreamYard, so hopefully we're live. But yeah, we're just going to go for it and see what happens. So welcome everybody. I am Anne-Marie, owner of Soul Awakening Academy, and I'm here with the beautiful Dr. Tegan Elm. And you always try and leave out your doctor title, and I'm like, no, own it, girlfriend. This is so cool to have you. Now, we met a couple of years ago and you trained in chakra alchemy with the Soul Awakening Academy. And then you then went on, because of your extensive background, to teach some masterclasses, trauma-informed and spiritual masterclasses in our big spiritual facilitator training program. And one of the things was all about love and connection and all about the human conditioning. So tonight, because we're hitting Valentine's Day and other things, winter's been a struggle. I felt like it's been such long months. January's felt a bit bluesy, and the world is changing, Dating, I find online dating and the speed that you can just cut people off really is doing something to those meaningful connections that we as humans actually crave and desire, but it's not really happening because of fast-paced technology. So we are going to talk tonight about how to cultivate authentic human connections, first starting within, looking at our spiritual selves, how we've become conditioned, and how we can form secure attachments to really find the deep intimacy and feel safe with emotional bonds that we form with people. So take it away, my Dr. Tegan friend.
What would you think very much? So thank you very much for inviting me, Anne-Marie. I really appreciate it. I absolutely love anything that I could do with Soul Awakening Academy. So it's just a real pleasure to be joining you tonight and live. So I thought, the first thing that I really wanted to touch upon around that kind of authentic relationship building and the work that we do within ourselves is the idea of frequency. So the idea of frequency when it comes to emotions and the human body. And there is really cool science behind it. So when we talk about frequency in this context, we're talking about the idea that everything, and that is everything, vibrates at a certain frequency. And that includes our thoughts, our emotions, and even our physical body. And it's kind of like the universe is this giant orchestra, and everything, including us, is playing its own note. So you probably have heard this idea in places like spiritual circles, especially when it comes to things like chakra healing, for example. But what's really interesting is that this concept has solid roots in psychology and neuroscience. So, for example, there's a scale called the SPANE, SPANE, and that stands for the scale of positive and negative experience. And it's a tool psychologists use to measure emotional well-being. And it's not metaphysical, it's grounded in science, but it helps to paint a picture of how we experience emotional vibrations. So what does it all mean? Well, everything in the universe, including our emotions, is thought to vibrate at a certain frequency. And so positive emotions like love, joy, gratitude, they're believed to have high frequencies. Well, the more negative emotions that we experience, things like fear and anger and sadness, are thought to have a lower frequency. So when you're feeling happy and at peace, you're in a high frequency state. But if you're feeling quite stressed out or upset, your frequency will drop. So if you dive into the science behind it, you'll find that brain waves actually correspond to these emotional frequencies, and different mental states, so like being relaxed or focused, they're associated with different brainwave patterns. So for example, beta waves are linked to alertness and concentration, while alpha waves are tied to our relaxation. Theta waves are tied to deep meditation, and delta waves are deep sleep. So our brains are constantly shifting between these frequencies, and it depends on our emotional and mental state, really. And it doesn't stop there. So emotions will impact our physical body, and when we're in that low frequency state, like for example stress, then we know what it does to the body. It will trigger that survival response, that fight or flight response, and so those hormones are released, that cortisol and adrenaline. But on the flip side, positive emotions like happiness and gratitude can actually then improve our immune system and overall health. So what you're feeling emotionally doesn't just stay in the mind, but it physically impacts our body. And this is when it starts to get into really, really interesting, actually. So the subconscious mind plays a huge role in this. Your subconscious is constantly absorbing everything that's happening around you, and it's highly receptive to the frequencies of your thoughts and your emotions. So if you're constantly stressed or feeling like you're in a negative state, then your subconscious will actually start to align with that energy and influence your behaviors, your beliefs. But when you shift to higher frequency emotions like joy and peace, your subconscious will start to adjust to that too. And that's where authenticity comes into. So it's a concept that's often tied to high emotional frequencies. And again, like lots of people within spiritual and self-help communities do believe that living authentically, being true to your real self, is the highest vibrational state that you can reach.
Mm-hmm.
The reason is because when you're authentic, you're in harmony with yourself. Your internal feelings match your external actions. There's no inner conflict going on. You're being real, and that creates that peace and that balance. And authenticity is considered a high frequency emotion because it leads to a sense of well-being, and it reduces that internal tension that kind of appears when we try to be someone that we're not, which then can lead to negative emotions. Whereas when you're authentic, you're more likely to feel those emotions like joy, like love and contentment. And again, all of those are very high frequency emotions. And then from a psychological perspective, living authentically is linked to better mental health, lower stress, and higher self-esteem. And they, clearly they're all indicators of high vibrational states too. So it affects us energetically, and when it affects us energetically, that authenticity is also said to allow our energy to flow more freely through our body. Whereas in contrast, if we're being inauthentic, so struggling with who we really are, or maybe even pretending to be someone that we're not, it's thought that that creates blocks within your energy, which then can lead to negative emotions like that fear, that guilt, that shame. It's like putting up a wall that prevents your true energy from flowing freely. So how do we raise our emotional frequency? Where do we start when we're thinking about raising our emotional frequency and truly living authentically? There are a few things that we can do to shift towards a higher frequency. So a really good thing is around mindfulness and meditation. They help you become really aware of your emotions, and they give you that space to choose the higher frequency states. And when you catch yourself slipping into kind of a negative space, mindfulness allows you to shift your focus and choose a better feeling. It doesn't necessarily ask you to not feel those things, because actually as human beings, it's important that we feel a range of emotions. And we wouldn't be authentic if we were happy all of the time. But being in that mindfulness state it kind of helps us to refocus our mind a little bit and think, you know, are we truly feeling that way, or is there something else going on for us there? And then another key aspect to it is practicing gratitude. Again, you know, you'll all be familiar with this, but when we focus on all of the good things in our life, then our frequency will rise with that. And it's a bit like a muscle. So the more we practice gratitude and that positive thinking, the easier it becomes to kind of stay in that high frequency zone. And it's, you know, it's about kind of thinking authentically as well. So how can we feel comfortable and be in a space where we can express our true feelings, our thoughts, our desires without fear of judgment? And when we do that, when we're able to do that, the higher our frequency will go.
Mm-hmm.
And that means embracing who you really are, and letting go of that need to fit in, or letting go of that need to be someone that you're not, because we're who we're meant to be, aren't we? And that's the best that, you know, that's the best that we can be. And I would say a key aspect, we've got our physical health. We you know, if we can take care of our physical health, things like getting enough sleep and staying active and eating well, that's really important. But emotional healing is essential. So if there's kind of unresolved trauma, or, you know, anything like that, it might make it more difficult to raise our frequency. And so that's where working through some of those issues can be really helpful, whether, you know, whichever way you go to kind of do that, it can help raise that, you know, help make the room for those higher vibes. And there's so much value in that, when we embrace that authenticity, when we work on healing, and when we focus on raising that emotional state, we create more space for our health and our happiness, and ultimately more peace in our lives as well.
I love what you said about who we're meant to be, but the thought popped into my head is, you know, really we are who we're conditioned to be until we, and sometimes that's fine, and, you know, there are no issues there, and, you know, people feel authentic and have no need to self-reflect or think about any, you know, conditions they've had placed upon them. They've had a lovely life, and that's great. But a lot of us, a high percentage of us, can relate to who we've been conditioned to be. And a lot of the people obviously come into Soul Awakening Academy and want to retrain. You know, they've been corporate, HR, NHS, teachers, and they're like, this is not for me. But they've been conditioned into that. And then there's a turning point. Sometimes it's a crisis, and they just take a look at their lives and go, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Because it feels so inauthentic to who they want to be, or who they're meant to be, however you want to say it. But they just feel it.
Yeah. And it's that inner conflict, isn't it? It's that inner conflict that feels so uncomfortable. You know, and it does, in a way, I think, you know, it can be quite insidious, can't it? Because it can creep up on us at different points in our lives.
We can ignore it as well. A lot of people do tend to ignore it at first, because it's such a change, it's such a transformation that we would have to make internally and externally to change our lives, to step into, let's say, a path of authenticity when we're on a path of conditionality. It can be a big bridge that you have to cross, and there are so many factors that people have to consider, because most of us don't take this path in our 20s of authenticity. We are really conditioned at that age, and we are, you know, living from the place of the ego, the materialistic. That, you know, that's good. That's, you know, there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but it's definitely, we've been conditioned, we're still conditioned, and we've been told to believe that by having that job, doing that thing, earning that money is the path to happiness, which is the thing that we all desire. But then when we get there, we realize, well, I'm not happy. We talked about this just briefly off air, didn't we? And I remember I was fixated on my weight at one point in my life, and I would say to myself, when I get to this weight, I'll be happy. I'll be happy. I got there and I went, oh, there's no difference. I'm not happy. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I think it's that it's the conditioned self where we've grown up wanting connection. We deeply want connection as human beings, don't we? And when we're younger, we sort of try and get that connection by fitting in. We look at what other people are doing and think, oh, actually, I should do that, because we want to be the same and we want to fit in. And so actually that's really difficult as we grow and we start to have that inner conflict and think, no, actually, I could be totally myself and people will still love me and I'm still worthy of love. And most importantly, I can still love myself as well, because we do, you know, we were talking about conditional love, weren't we? And how, you know, that in itself can be really difficult for us in relationships, but then it can also be difficult with the relationship that we have with ourselves. And we put those conditions onto that relationship too, don't we?
Yes, very heavily. I mean, just thinking about, I'm just going to make sure this is going to the channels that people are going to be really wanting to watch this. So I'm just going to make sure it's that. The authenticity, it sounds so easy. Just be authentic. But because we have been so heavily conditioned and so many learned behaviors and everything, and you know what humans are about, we learn by copying behavior. It's really hard to know. And so sometimes the biggest question and the hardest question for people to answer is what I really want. And there's a lot of guilt wrapped up in it. And, you know, if somebody's had a life where they've not had a voice very much, their opinions haven't been validated, they've not been validated as a person, they've felt defected or broken or abandoned and rejected, they're the caregiver, they're the responsible, you know, as a child they become the responsible parent.
Yeah.
You know, role reversal, all of that, you know, we're relying on you to look after us. There's so much guilt around being your true authentic self. There is a lot of I can imagine there's a lot of fear. What will happen if how many people depend on me to be this way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of, I think there's a lack of self-love as well, because I think part of that movement to be in your authentic self is actually about truly loving yourself, including the parts that maybe you don't necessarily like all the time. But actually you can still love all of those parts and know deep down that, you know, you as a whole, you that it comes with everything that you are as a human, you know, the things that you see as good, but then the things that you might see more negatively, all of that deserves that love and all of that deserves that nurture. And it's really difficult if, as you say, you've not had that before and you've had those constraints placed on you, whether it's, you know, through kind of like childhood attachments, or as you've gotten older and you might have had a difficult experience in a relationship where someone's made you feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, childhood attachment's probably one of the biggest, really big topic, isn't it? That's been discussed for a little bit now. And I read the book called Attached, and it was so good. You know, it really helped me think about dating and how we date and when we date and where we look for dates and the type of person that we end up dating. And, you know, we were saying about the online dating app space, things move so quickly. You are discarded like a piece of paper so quickly. And it's like, And you do that to people as well. It's just how it goes. It's like, yeah, no, okay, yeah, nice chat, bye. And it's like, wow, what are we actually searching for in this space? And I think in the book attached, it said, be very careful on dating apps because it's not full of securely attached people. Quite the opposite. Securely attached people don't jump online dating apps. They don't jump on there when they split up from a relationship. But insecurely attached people do. Anxious avoidance or dismissive avoidance, they do,
Yeah.
because
Wow.
on to the next one. But a securely attached person takes time out. They take time out, they reflect, they heal. They don't need to jump headlong into another relationship. And they said it's likely that if you go on these dating apps, it's a high percentage that you will end up dating a dismissive avoidant, a fearful avoidant, an avoidant.
Mm-hmm.
And that can actually throw a securely attached person into an anxious attachment or another attachment. Our attachment styles aren't fixed.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a working model, isn't it? So, yeah, it's fascinating. It's really fascinating, isn't it? And I think there's something in that kind of fast-paced environment that, as you say, will kind of attract or, can influence attachment styles and particular attachment styles that people have. But it's also, I suppose, that internalizing of what's going on in those dating apps, isn't it? So like you're saying, just being swiped the next person, it's very, I can imagine it, it's different to when we connect with somebody and we're having that conversation and we're able to kind of share more about us, aren't we?
Yeah.
In certain moments.
Yeah. And, thinking about why, and I am guilty of it, why when we are in pain through a broken relationship and it's ended, whatever's happened, and we're struggling and we're in pain, and it's with all things, we look for the sticky plaster.
Yeah.
What's going to make me feel better? And we become so avoidant of feeling our feelings that we will do anything to alleviate the pain.
Yeah, absolutely. Because
And what
it's
is that? Why do we do that? It must be a society thing.
mhm.
I don't know.
And I think it's also maybe part of our survival mechanism, isn't it? Because it's that uncomfortable feeling that it's so uncomfortable we don't want to feel it anymore. I've been thinking a lot actually about the book How to Be the Love You Seek, by Dr. Nicole Apira. It's a fascinating book, and she explores a key and really interesting thing that she kind of looks at in the book is how we show up in relationships, and more importantly, really, I suppose, is who we show up as.
Mhm.
And it's really fascinating because we're often unaware of the different selves that we might present to the world. But what she does in the book is she kind of digs quite deep into that, and she helps us to understand that our past experiences, like we've said, shape how we interact with others. So, for example, we might get stuck in presenting our wounded self. And this is the part of us that carries that pain from past relationships, whether it's from childhood or past romantic partners or even past friendships as well. And it's the part of us that feels unworthy of love. And maybe even we do that without realizing it. We might go into a new relationship unconsciously expecting them to reflect that old hurt, which can really set us up for failure there straight away. And in the book, she basically says that this wounded self isn't our true essence, but it's a role that we might find ourselves playing if we haven't had the chance to do that inner work, that inner healing. And she talks about a few other elements that we can show up as, or a few different selves that we can be. So there's one called the adaptive self, and that's basically when we it's the version of us that adapts to other people's needs, often to the point where we start losing ourselves in the process. And so if you've ever found yourself constantly adjusting who you are to fit into someone else's life, or feel like you have to earn love through performance, that's the adaptive self at play. And it's like we wear a mask to be loved, trying to fit into someone else's expectations. But the problem with that is it's not sustainable, because eventually we do start to feel disconnected from ourselves. And that, if it's true love, it won't require us to shrink or contort ourselves in any way.
Exactly.
Yeah. And as you said before as well, Anne-Marie, about that avoidant style, well, that's another self that you can present us as well. It's an avoidant self that, again, the part of us that will get scared when love feels too close, when love feels too intense. Instead of leaning into that intimacy, what we might do instead is pull away, or we might shut down. And it's a protective mechanism. It's a way to prevent that vulnerability, because deep down, we're afraid that we're going to be hurt again. And the problem with that self is that while it might protect us from pain in the short term, it then actually stops us from creating that deep, nourishing connection that we crave. And in the book, I don't want to give too much of the book away, but in the book, she suggests that overcoming that avoidance is about trying to rewire our nervous system. So learning to sit with that discomfort, ultimately opening ourselves up to receive that deeper, secure relationship. And well, I think so many people will resonate with this, but the pleasing self. So that version of us that's just always seeking external validation, always worried about what other people are going to think, that part of us that is so focused on making everyone else happy, touch with our own needs, our own desires. And it's a way of avoiding rejection, but it is absolutely exhausting, and it starts to lead to resentment if it continues for a long time. And it's difficult to unlearn those people-pleasing behaviours. It's difficult to reclaim our voice and boundaries in relationships.
Very difficult. Really I observed that to be one of the hardest, and I feel like I've experienced all the different levels of, projecting different types of trauma you can possibly, have. But what I've witnessed is the people-pleasing archetype to be one of the hardest to overcome, because of the boundaries that has to be put in place to stop the people pleasing, and because of the fear of being alone for people when they stop the people pleasing. There's so much wrapped up in it. And I remember, when I first fell in love and continued into my 20s having relationships, I was the fearful avoidant. I would not meet the parents, anything, as soon as it got to a place of shut down. It was just, and it was all because I was just terrified of being hurt. You have to protect yourself, because you feel like if you allow yourself to be hurt, you're going to shatter on the floor, and your whole self will just be broken, and nobody's going to come and pick you up and piece you back together. So you're just going to be completely fucked. So just don't even let that happen. And it is a safety mechanism, but you can heal yourself from it.
You absolutely can. You absolutely can. That it's possible to heal from all of those different selves that we might struggle with and we might grapple with. And what again, I mean, I do recommend the book, in fairness, but what we do know as well from the book and other pieces of writing out there that people have done on love and relationships and connection, is that we have to, in order to truly experience that love, whether it's giving or receiving, and both of those, we have to try and stop ourselves from living in these patterns of protection or fear. And instead, we need to learn how to heal our wounds, set healthy boundaries, show up as our real unmasked selves. And that way that we show up in relationships is often a reflection of how we've learned to relate to ourselves. So if we can learn to love and care for ourselves in this really authentic and compassionate way, then we can begin to show up in love, others from a more secure and grounded place. And it's just about becoming someone who can give and receive that love freely when we've done the internal work of self-acceptance. And it's definitely an ongoing process. So, it doesn't, it's something that we can work on and we can reflect on. And yeah, it's I think that actually makes it more magical, because we are constantly on that journey of self-discovery and self-acceptance and healing. We talk about healing from trauma and things like that, and I often say to people, actually, I don't know if we can ever say we are healed human beings, but I think that we can say we are healing, because we don't know what things are going to throw up for us in the future, but we know what we can do in the present, and we know that we can start that work on whether it's healing some of those relational patterns that we've had. And more often than not, it's about healing that relationship that we have with ourselves, so that we feel secure, that we feel protected. We're not operating from a place of fear. And the biggest sort of takeaway of all of that for me is that love isn't about fitting into some idealized version of ourselves or another person. It's about showing up with all our parts, our flaws, our vulnerabilities, our growth, and still being worthy of deep, true connection. And it's that journey of becoming whole within ourselves first, and from that place we then offer that love that we seek ourselves.
And I think when we started the conversation, there was something around, we feel the vibration. Daisy's coming over for a cuddle. We feel the vibration of authenticity. And I know, in our courses, we look at the data. I think it's the David Hawkins frequency scale. And I don't think that authenticity was on there. So it's great that that's been measured. But I was speaking to one of our coaches the other day, and they are holding women's circles, and she was saying just how much she loves it. And I said, the energy is palpable, isn't it, in a group? And that's why, because in groups, people share. I'm in a group at the moment, and we're all going really deep with our vulnerabilities, and the energy is palpable. When you're in a room and you're being held, and you're holding space for other people, and they're being so vulnerable and open and honest, and maybe it's the first time they've ever heard themselves say something and be so honest with themselves, that container, that energy, wow, it's measurable, it's off the scale, it's so beautiful. Another thing I wanted to say, because this may resonate with people, and this is why it's so important to do the healing on your attachment styles. Because when I had my first son, Marcus, and I'd been adopted, I'd been put into care, I'd, really carried an abandonment and rejection wound and felt like I wasn't good enough. I couldn't be intimate in relationships. There was so much damage and trauma around love and safety and trust and all of that. So I was so armored that I felt like I could run away from my son and run away from motherhood, because I didn't feel good enough to be his mother. And that was an attachment style. So it doesn't just happen in your partnership relationship, it happens in every relationship you have. And I've even analyzed my business relationships, because if your attachment style plays out in every corner of your life, where you're relating to yourself, to others, to think, so it's really important to do that work, because that's where my work started.
Yeah. And isn't it fascinating when you go on that journey and you can learn that about yourself as well, like the different, attachment style that you have. And what I love about it, it's one of the busiest theories in psychology, which I love because it's always, there's always research, and it's a multi-level theory as well, because it not only does it look at attachment from like a biological perspective, but it looks at it from an emotional perspective, from a kind of a neuroscience perspective, psychological. So it covers all of those elements, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's really quite powerful is, as human beings, and a big part of attachment is our internal working model. And that's like the blueprint, isn't it, for our relationship? So that's what tells us, right, this is how I should behave in a relationship. And this is what other people are going to, how other people are going to see me, and how people are going to experience that relationship. And this is how I show up in the world. And this is how I see the world. So it makes perfect sense that our attachment is reflected in all of those other relationships that we share, or have with, even how we feel worthy of being in the world, whether we do feel worthy of being in the world, and what we feel we have to give to the world. It reflects everything, doesn't it?
It does, because you were saying about the book, and in the Big Master Coaching course, we look at a teacher, she's no longer with us now, Barbara Mule, and she did something called inner scripts and fantasy scripts. Basically, you go back over significant events, so far back as you can remember, really emotionally impacted events. What was it? What happened? How did you feel as that child? And what did that cause you to believe about yourself? And you can see the story, and it's always one really emotionally traumatic experience then is the domino for, the foundation for all the other internal beliefs that we make. And it just solidifies. I am that. I must be that. I'm that. And then we become that. And then every situation we have, it's in our subconscious nervous system, and we obviously have to be right. So we have this, fantasy, or this inner script that we have. We have an inner script that maybe everybody abandons me. So the fantasy script is, one day the man on the white shining horse he's going to see me across a crowded room. He's going to see my qualities. He's going to rescue me. We have that, and it's not a reality. None of those things are true. So it's about unpacking all of that to then rewire. And rewiring is possible, completely possible. And that's the thing that people should know. No matter what's happened, isn't it? They can rewire a thought train, a thought line. It can be rewired.
Absolutely. And that's the fascinating thing about neuroplasticity, isn't it? That we can rewire elements within the brain. And I remember a few years back, and I was in a conference, and they put up some pictures of two brains of children, and they said, right, this child on this side has experienced significant childhood abuse, and the child on the other side hasn't. They've had secure childhood and come from a loving and nurturing home. And I remember them saying, so you can see the difference in the brain here, and you could. And they were talking about the, I think it was the grey matter that was less apparent in the child who had experienced trauma. But so everyone in the room, I remember looking around and thinking, oh my gosh, everyone in the room looks so sad now, because they think that's permanent. And straight after they said, but we have this incredible superpower that exists within all of us, and that's the neuroplasticity. And that's when that's when we can, some of the neurons can be rewired, because I just think the brain is it's the most powerful machine in the whole world, isn't it? And it's so interesting that we get to a certain, so our brain kind of fully stops developing around 25, 26. But then at that point, what happens is this really interesting process where it starts to prune away what is not needed. So as we get older, that's when we start struggling with our memory and things like that. Well, that's because it's pruning away what it thinks isn't needed. And that pruning is based on experiences that we've had, but it's also based on experiences that we haven't had as well. So, some of those connections. But, that's where that kind of notion of healing is possible comes from, because it is absolutely possible. We can rewire it. We can significantly make a change in our healing pattern, because yes, trauma can kind of impact the brain development and shape of it, but so can healing.
I get a lot of people that reach out and say, and they've had, or their circumstances are horrendous, and they're like, how do I heal? And they're like, how do I heal? How do I stop this? How do I fix this? This has happened, 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 this is, I'm like, ugh. And it's horrendous. And it's like, there is no quick fix. It's all about healing the nervous system. And quite often people who've had that level of trauma or still in trauma, and the nervous system is chaotic, and their actual environment can mirror that as well. So it's really to find that secure attachment. It's not so easy. It's easy for us to say it, but what does it even mean? And like you say, it's about calming that nervous system down. And I think the work of Dr. Bruce Lipton says, we've all got these genes, the DNA, but actually what switches them on and off is the environment. It's a stimulus to the environment. So the first thing I would suggest to anybody who's like, well, how do I do it? Is look at your environment, because your environment is affecting your hormones, your DNA, your health, your mental well-being. Take a look around. What is going on? Is it chaotic, or is it, does it bring you a level of peace? If it doesn't bring you a level of peace, start to work on that, because that will help you calm down and start to change your life in ways that bring you peace, rather than keep you in the fight or flight fear-based system. And it's the network, isn't it? It's the safety that we need to feel to do the healing work, because you become very vulnerable when your defenses come down and you're changing who you've built yourself to be and conditioned yourself to be for protection. When that starts to peel away, that is such an emotionally vulnerable place to be in, and you need to have things ready. It's like coming out of the A&E. If you've broken your leg, you need that plaster cast on it. You need to rest up on the sofa. You need maybe somebody to come and bring you cups of tea and make you dinner. You need that level of support, don't you, to really do the healing work.
You do. And they refer to it as the dark night of the soul as well, don't they? And I remember reading in a book somewhere that said we might not just have one dark night of the soul, and they don't mean just a night. The dark night of the soul can last for quite a long time, can't it?
Yeah.
And we can come out of it, but then we might go back into it. And I think that's what is really powerful about what you were saying before about the women's circles that you've been to, and from your interview the other day as well, because in those spaces where we're with people that I guess we might really truly resonate with, we're starting to practice authenticity there, aren't we? Because we're being a bit vulnerable. We've got that care around us, and it's painful sometimes to do that. And having those people there that are just like, no, actually, I'm here and I'm holding this space for you, and it's going to be okay. I'm not going anywhere. That's what really helps in those moments, doesn't it? And when we're vulnerable, it gives other people the permission to do that as well, and that also then gives them the permission to act from a place of authenticity.
It does. When one person goes there, it opens the door for others to go there. Another thing is not allowing yourself to go into trigger mode.
Mm.
If there's any feedback or something happens that you could be triggered by, because not everything is about you, but when we are emotional, we can, you know, we're doing the work, but it's still, you know, we can still get triggered, and that's a really, it's just, normally we can spiral into that and go, that, well, that obviously means something about me then, and we start judging then, and we go into that judgment space, and you know, we can really get ourselves back to a place of starting again. It's to not internalize stuff, because when there's no judgment, things can't as easily be internalized, because you're judging yourself first. You know, so it's thinking about, am I being critical here? Do I actually know that's true? I'm judging here. Why am I judging? This is not about me, you know, and that can also be present for people as well. If they are in situations where they're being vulnerable, or they're being open, or they're going into workplaces and they're changing, but something happens, something gets said, a look is given or isn't given to them. They don't get you know, they're looking for this validation. It's to come into a place being more authentic, and holding space for themselves, and not allowing themselves to be a puppet on the string, but constantly seeking validation. Is this authentic side of me okay for you? You know? So
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think tied into that, and I think what comes up for a lot of people is this notion of conditional love, isn't it? And many of us have been conditioned to believe that love is something that we have to earn, and whether that's through achievement, whether it's through perfection or meeting the expectation of others. And it's like we were taught that love was this external reward, something that we get only when we prove ourselves worthy of it. And when that's our framework, when that's our inner framework that we're operating from, we do start to carry that into all of our relationships. And this kind of like conditional love, that love that depends on us meeting certain conditions or standards, can often stem from early experiences, like in childhood. And it might be that maybe we were only praised when we did something right, or maybe we only received affection when we behaved in a certain way. And as a result of that, we internalize that idea that love is not unconditional. It feels transactional, like a contract. I'll love you if you do this, or I'll love you if you act in this way. But the problem is, and what's quite damaging about it, is that it sets us up for this lifetime of trying to perform for love, whether it's trying to be the perfect partner, parent, or friend. And we can often find ourselves constantly altering our behaviour, suppressing our true selves, or overcompensating just to keep love or validation in our lives. And it's exhausting. And the problem as well is that we often extend this to ourselves. So like you were saying earlier, Anne-Marie, we might think, I'll love myself when I lose this weight. I'll love myself when I get this promotion. I'll love myself when I'm more successful, or when I'm in a better place emotionally. That constant sense of conditionality means we're never truly at peace with ourselves. We're always striving, always pushing, never allowing ourselves to just be worthy of love in the here and now as we are. And it was a few months ago. I saw a quote and I love it so much. I say it all the time now, and it said that we can't expect to be operating at our best all the time, because then it stops being our best and it becomes our norm. And I was thinking, isn't that just so true in every way? You know, with ourselves and with other people as well.
Yeah, and I resonate with the condition, you know, gosh, when I first started the business, oh my God, when I look back now and I think, God, if I wrote something once, I'd written it 100 times before it was ever put out there. And then I had this massive fear, if a student messaged me, or I was like, oh, they're going to tell me it's crap, or, I've done something wrong. And it was just this. And well, I'd grown up with that, like, perfectionist parent type of thing. And it runs through you. And you know what else it does? It hurts your body.
Mm-hmm.
It makes your body completely rigid.
Yeah.
It really does. And you don't allow your body to be free. So if anybody can resonate with that, our body's armor, and it takes on a position that it uses to protect itself. And, one of the perfectionist is that rigid, and one of the most amazing things I've found, but hardest things to do, was to be heard and be seen.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in groups, going to one of them was the Hoffman Institute, which is amazing. I recommend anyone to do that. And we did these exercises and like bashing with the thing and everything, but even just breathing loud, if they get you to do even I couldn't even do that, just I hated anybody hearing me. It was horrible. And I remember this guy. He's so nice, and he must have been in tune with how I was feeling, because I was like with the bat, and everybody's like rah rah going crazy, and I was just like and he was like, come on, you come on, and he was like really helping me. And in the end, I was like, fuck you, like really going for it. And then dancing as well. I mean, I love to dance. I love I love dancing, but put me in a group
Yeah.
of strangers and just press play on the music and go, right, dance. Oh my God. I was one of those people. And it's a perfectionist thing. It's like that physical, whatever, inner critic that keeps you locked into perfection mode, where you have a fear of being seen, have a fear of being heard, and have a rigid body.
Yes.
And I'll be honest, that fucked with my intimacy.
Yeah.
When in relationships, it really was a stumbling block for me. I had issues around intimacy and vulnerability. And it was all related to that. So one of the best things that anybody can do for themselves is to find some somatic experiences which allow them to break free of that rigidity. It's been one of the best things I've ever done for the healing path.
We need some more info on this Hoffman Institute.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, the Hoffman Institute. Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, and I think, do you know, Anne-Marie, I think it resonates with so many of us, doesn't it? Because we put so much pressure on ourselves all the time to kind of be that perfect person, and I think when we get to that point, when we've been on that journey, when we find those, we do some of those somatic exercises and we start to really lean into that vulnerability, when we start to really lean into our own authentic selves, and we start to be able to kind of thrive in a space of unconditional acceptance, that's when that magic happens. Mm-hmm. Because a truly unconditional love isn't about approval. It's not about validation or fulfilling conditions. It's just showing up as we are. It's accepting ourselves and accepting others in all of our messiness, all of our imperfections, and knowing that we're just so worthy of love simply because we exist.
Yeah.
It's easier said than done, but we need to try and shift from this model of conditional love to a model of self-compassion, self-acceptance. And if we're able to start practicing that unconditional love towards ourselves, we can then dismantle that belief that we have to earn love through external measures. we can stop waiting for that perfect version of ourselves and start embracing who we are right now, with all imperfections and flaws and vulnerability, because that, it doesn't exist, does it? We have that idea of perfection.
It's our ideal. It's our idea of it. And that our idea of anything can be anything we want it to be, because nobody comes along and says, "Okay, Anne-Marie, this is what your best self looks like, and you need to now morph into that."
Yeah.
It's all fabricated through the idea of in our mind. It's a fantasy.
Yeah.
What would you say? This is what I would say to people, because I talk about my own healing journey and what's worked for me.
Yes.
One of the hardest things, or the best things, or the ways that I know I didn't love myself at all, and one of the hardest things to do was to actually look myself in the mirror and look deep into my eyes and hold the stare, just keep looking at myself and just seeing into myself.
Yeah.
And moving from self-hate, hatred, to a place of acceptance and love, and asking yourself, like, what don't you accept about finding out where you're conditioned.
Yeah.
You've only got an issue with something because somebody told you once that that wasn't acceptable.
Mhm.
And that's what you've conditioned yourself to believe about yourself. But, looking at yourself in the mirror and telling yourselves the words of appreciation. Today, Anne-Marie, I love you for
Yeah.
everything about you, and actually feeling your body as well, really kind of bringing in that loving touch to yourself as well. Because, these our issues, our hormones, our tissues, our cells, our organs get stored. That's why we have pain, and the doctors don't know why. A lot of the time it's emotional pain. So it's about bringing the healing into the body and the nervous system, doing that eye-to-eye connection with yourself, and really starting to open up the heart. Because I'm not a bad person, never was a bad person, but I couldn't make that connection with myself. There was a lot of self-hate there that I'd, you know, been conditioned to believe about myself. So the first step for me was to let go of that, and
Yeah.
to really start to accept myself and love myself.
It's so powerful to do that, isn't it? It's so powerful to look at yourself. And again, that's so vulnerable, even when we're on our own. Even thinking about doing that for some people feel nerve-wracking, but there is so much power to be said in telling ourselves how much we love ourselves and what we actually love about ourselves. Because often we've had one comment that we've held on to, and we could have a million other wonderful comments about ourselves, and we never believe them, or we never remember them, do we? But we hold on to those other comments, and there's so much power in just seeing yourself and being yourself, and that touch, and releasing some of that build-up of emotions in the tissues. And that's, again, that's why people will quite often cry or laugh if they're getting a massage, won't they? Because it's that release of the emotion. And I'd probably say as well, for me, part of my healing has been going through a process of reparenting myself a bit. So I think if anyone's grown up where they feel like that love was conditional, you can go through that reparenting. So it's about showing up as the loving, compassionate parent to our inner child, and giving ourselves the love and acceptance that maybe we didn't always get.
Mm-hmm.
So once we start offering ourselves that unconditional love, we become better able to experience it in other relationships, and we no longer carry that weight of trying to earn love from other people. And it's not easy to undo all that conditioning that we've internalized around love, but it is possible. And if we set boundaries, if we practice self-compassion, if we learn to love ourselves unconditionally, then we can break free from that cycle of conditional love. And that's when we can finally begin to experience true connection, not only with others, but and I think most importantly with ourselves as well.
Yeah, reparenting ourselves is such an important phase of the healing journey, 100%. So yeah, we'll wrap it up. So that's been a really lovely talk, and I do hope it helps people, because like the people who obviously like watch my channel and stuff, they do reach out and they've been through really tough experiences and they want to know how to start to heal themselves. It's all about the nervous system, internalization, the environment, the reparenting, the self-acceptance and self-love. So I really enjoyed our conversation. We could talk for hours and hours and hours.
It's always wonderful. It goes
Yeah,
so fast as well.
I know it goes so fast because there's so much to say. But I've really enjoyed it. So I'm sure we'll have more to talk about and we'll jump on again at some point. So if anybody's watching and they do have any questions for myself or Dr. Tegan, just post them and we will get back to you. All right. Thank you so much, Tegan. Lots of love. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.